All right, you are good to go.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us in this discussion of the important issue of how to improve our communities by creating a space that welcomes all persons. My name is B.A. Muskowick, and I am Executive Director of the West Virginia Interfaith Refugee Ministry, a nonprofit organization that began in 2015 with the vision of improving the lives of refugees. WVIRM is a member of Welcoming America and affiliated with Episcopal Migration Ministries. I want to recognize Charleston Mayor Amy Schuler Goodwin for proclaiming September 12 through 20 as Welcoming Week in Charleston, a time to bring together immigrants, refugees, and longtime residents to strengthen connections that encourage inclusion and diversity in order to achieve collective prosperity. Tonight's discussion will be posted on our YouTube channel for those who could not join us on Facebook. And our format will be as follows. We have 5 panelists. Each will present opening remarks, followed by questions presented by our moderator. We will have a short Q&A at the end of the hour. Introducing our 5 panelists in the order in which they will speak. First is Ibtesam Barazi, President and a founding member of West Virginia Interfaith Refugee Ministry. She is serving her 6th year as Vice President of the Islamic Association of West Virginia. Since her retirement after 29 years with OSHA, Ms. Barazi has dedicated her life to dismantling barriers of fear and misconceptions about immigrants and Muslim immigrants in particular. She has been recognized for this by several governmental and non-governmental organizations. Next, Rabbi Joe Blair earned a BA and Master of Computer Science degree at the University of Virginia and a law degree at William and Mary. His search for deeper knowledge of his Jewish community and religion led him to attend the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia, from which he graduated. He earned a Master of Hebrew Letters degree in 1996. He has been at Temple Israel in Charleston, a Reformed Jewish congregation since July 2018. Reverend Michael Farmer is a native of South Carolina. He moved to West Virginia when he was in the 5th grade. He was the first African-American student body president at St. Albans High School. Reverend Farmer has been pastor of Risen City Church, an offshoot of Resurrection Church, since its founding. Paola Garcia is a DACA recipient who immigrated from Mexico at the age of 2. She attended Transylvania University and graduated with a bachelor's in psychology, with an emphasis on the role that race, class, and ethnicity have historically had and still currently have on our educational systems. She works in the area of coordinating trauma-sensitive care. She is on the board of directors of ACLU West Virginia and serves as the affiliate Equity and Inclusion Officer. Ms. Garcia speaks throughout the Appalachian area on issues related to immigration, particularly DACA, and the multifaceted identity that arises from immigrants' experiences. Our last panelist is the Right Reverend W. Michie Klusmeyer. He was consecrated the 7th Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of West Virginia in 2001, after serving several churches in Illinois. He received his undergraduate degree from Illinois College and his Master of Divinity degree from the General Theological Seminary. Tonight's moderator is Mollie Kennedy, Community Outreach Director of ACLU West Virginia, which is a partner in WVIRM's Welcoming Week. Ms. Kennedy graduated from West Virginia University with a BM in Music Education and received her master's in World Languages, Literature, and Linguistics, with a focus on teaching English to speakers of other languages. She has worked in a variety of roles in the education field and has been working with the ACLU in West Virginia since June of 2017. And so without further ado, I will ask the panelists each to offer their opening remarks, beginning with Ibtesam Barazi.
Thank you, BA, and welcome everybody. I am Ibtesam Barazi. I will start by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessing be upon you all. This is our traditional greeting. I am privileged to be serving as a president of this excellent organization that strives to help the immigrant community, the asylum seekers, refugees. I'm also grateful for every single member of this panelist for sharing their time with us tonight. I want to recognize BA Ms. Cowick for her hard work in doing this Welcome Week, and you did a magnificent job, BA, and we're grateful to you. I also want to thank the Mayor of Charleston for recognizing this week as Immigrant Welcome Week. This speaks for her openness and for her open heart that all is welcome in Charleston, West Virginia. So to go on the theme of creating our home together here in the Charleston, West Virginia, I'm going to talk to you and tell you a little bit about my story. When I came to this country in the early 70s as a young wife, my husband promised my mother that it will only take 3 years and we'll go back to Syria once he completes his PhD. Needless to say, he finished his PhD and I started my education here when we came to Charleston, West Virginia, and we started a family. I came here with my husband and a young child. So continuing my education here in Charleston, West Virginia, and then I started working with Federal OSHA as an assistant area director. I recognized the beauty and welcoming nature of West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, and specifically the beauty of West Virginia. Now, of course, not always things have been really rosy. We have faced some difficulty. When we came here to Charleston, West Virginia, as a Muslim, we were only about 10 families. So, and we didn't even have a place of worship to worship at. But we had to create a community. We had to build a community. And soon I start noticing that more and more Muslims started to come here. And that helps the family in serving, in making a home in a strange area where you think, do I really belong or I don't belong? So pretty soon we had built a house of worship in South Charleston, West Virginia, and our Muslim community grew. I loved my job as a federal inspector, as a federal assistant area director, because what OSHA does is help take care of the safety and health of West Virginia. So I felt like I was making a difference. Creating home together is what Islam stresses, as many Muslims believe that family life is the foundation of a human society, providing secure, healthy, and nurturing environment for children and parents alike. It was not always easy being here in the state. It wasn't always easy for my children to go to the schools here, specifically in junior high and high school. My oldest child specifically was really harassed and I can't forget, neither can he forget the fact that even some of his own teachers called him a camel jockey. And you can think and you can see how that affected his belief in returning to West Virginia. As a physician, as a retina surgeon to be specific, his returning to Charleston would have been really helpful to serve this community. But he did not want to raise his children in the same environment he was raised in. My other two kids, who also are physicians, do work in the state of West Virginia and have returned to the state of West Virginia after completing their education. They faced less of a harassment and less of a hostile and anti-Muslim environment. Now, if you look at my children, you would not know they are because they look like everybody else. The fact is their Arabic name that distinguished them from everybody else is what made everybody look at twice. So it wasn't always rosy. It wasn't always easy being here. But that didn't deter us, nor did it scare us of leaving Charleston, because I really, truly believe that this is a wonderful community. And our Muslim immigrant community are also highly professional. Most of them are doctors, engineers, teachers, lawyers, pharmacists, business owners, all contribute tremendously to this community. Go to CAMC and see who's taking care of the COVID patient at this time and who's working. So they really do serve a very important role in the community. Their children, almost 100% of them attend college. And a large percentage of them, to be quite truthful about it, even go to graduate school. They're becoming also professionals, just like their parents, doctors, teachers, lawyers, becoming an excellent citizen, loving, caring, and being kind to others. This is what they were taught. This is how they were raised and how they were nurtured. Family does not only mean your immediate family, but it does extend to your neighbors, to your community, to your city. Yes, America long ago offered the world a prize. It is land, it's freedom, it's promise for better life. However, I think America is the winner of that big prize, because what these immigrants did, they built our nation. Our nation was built on immigrants. They worked hard, they worked long hours. They did help this country become the greatest country that it is today. Vice President Joe Biden said, at our best, America has always been generous, kind, and optimistic, and we treat each other with dignity. Right now, this toxic environment we're in, it doesn't feel like it, and we can go back to how we are. In Charleston, among this group, among the mayor, among everybody here, it is a kind nation, and we are being kind to each other. It is our duty together to change the hearts and the minds of those who don't buy into this concept and feel like you are the stranger and they want to treat you as such. We need to do this again. We need to open our minds. We need to open our hearts to all who choose to come here. Immigrants who come to Charleston make this city richer, more diverse place to live, work, and raise a family. So we need to stand together. If we stand together and we do welcome all, we can bring young people back to the city. We do need to bring young people back to our city by being loving, kind, and appreciative of all the cultural diversity that does exist here in Charleston, West Virginia. And we need to share in our common humanity. Oh, and by the way, just to let you know, my mother never forgave my husband for not returning and for his promise to her after 3 years. 3 years, 50 years ago, they were all gone. And thank you all.
Thank you, Ibtesam. Rabbi Joe Blair.
Thank you so much. I'm probably the most recent arrival in West Virginia. I've been here for about 2 years. And I will say that one of the things that I found was that when I arrived, it was a warm, extremely comfortable, welcoming place to come. And I cannot stress enough how much I felt that, how much I still feel that, how much the people have been kind and open-hearted and generous in accepting me. And I want them to be able to do the same for others as well, because there are so many wonderful people in the world that would enhance this community by their presence. That said, I can speak only a little bit to my own background. As I said earlier, I am the grandson of immigrants. I know how hard they worked, what they brought to this country, and what they made of themselves, and what gifts they gave, what they shared, and what they brought into existence for themselves and for their descendants. And they are people that have made me proud. I know that other immigrants have come to this community and others, and they also have worked hard, have contributed much, have made themselves and others around them proud that they were there and part of that community. I draw on my own faith tradition, and I think of the fact that we are all B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, that we are all animated by Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, that we are all human beings in the same form, in the same way, that we cannot distinguish, that we cannot make differences. We cannot see any difference because God doesn't see any difference. We are all just human beings. We need to accept each other and welcome each other. And that welcome is part of extending ourselves and extending our hands to those who are also carriers of the spark of the divine within them, because they are in the image of God. There is nothing more to say than that these people have much to offer. And the more we can encourage them and support them and help them, the better our community is, the better off we all will be, the more sacred our community will feel, and the better our ability to be godly in this world.
Rabbi Blair, thank you for those words. And Reverend Michael Farmer, what do you have to say to us?
I'm Reverend Michael Farmer, as they mentioned there. I'm the pastor of Risen City Church on the west side of Charleston. We also service as a after-school program for Step by Step West Virginia. We actually have 15 after-school programs in Lincoln, Logan, and Kanawha County. That's one of the biggest things about our program is we have all this diversity within our programs. It's within a day, I can be at a very urban after-school program. I can leave and go an hour down the road and be in Lincoln County in Big Ugly Creek, West Virginia, which I did not know existed until I had to go and visit a site one day, 8 miles up a holler, and you see such a difference, culturally with our kids and families. Just my personal experience. I'm not a refugee or immigrant who came in, but I did move from Greenville, South Carolina to West Virginia when I was in middle school. And it was a very cultural shock that I had moving from an area where we bounced around from housing developments, pervasive poverty, a lot of the issues that happen in the metropolitan city, violence and such like that, to St. Albans, where I felt like it was the mecca of safety and suburban life and such. But within the first week of being there, I recall walking down the street to the local Dairy Queen with my mom and 2 sisters, and just being verbally berated by someone because of the color of my skin. It was very new to me. It was culturally shocking. I had never heard the N-word called to me before. So I had to ask my mom, I said, what does that even mean? It was very difficult trying to understand as a young person, how do you manage your life when somebody hates you because of the color of your skin? So grew up in St. Albans. I was the first African-American student body president. And I tell people, I said, I felt very welcomed by friends and such when I was in middle school and high school, but it was a struggle to get people to understand that I said, I'm not a threat to you because of your preconceived notions of who you believe I am because of the color of my skin. I always tell people, I say the greatest thing that I believe is that we've got to find common ground. And the first introduction to a friend I had of mine when I moved to West Virginia was I was in 5th grade for the last week of 5th grade, and a friend of mine, Michael Chandler, came up to me after I was introduced to the class. I was the only African-American kid in the class. There's actually a biracial girl there also. And he comes up to me with the thickest West Virginian accent. And he looks at me and he goes, "Hi, my name's Michael too. We should be best friends." And I was like, I want to leave right now. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. And it just scared me. I was just like, this is so weird. But it was such a great welcome from my friend, Michael Chandler, because he said, we both have the same name. He didn't look at my color, he didn't look at my skin. He said, we're going to find common ground, and we're still friends now, because he was able to look past what people may look at me and deem as unworthy of love and unworthy of just general caring. And he said, we're friends, and here's where we are. Just even growing up as an adult now, I worked in banking and finance. I made the move to after school care because I saw that so many of our youth and our families, there were so many things that they face disparity wise. We just realized even in this last year, I said, we see a ton of stuff nationally and locally with, racial issues on people because of the color of their skin, or their culture, or their race and creeds and colors. And I said, where do we stand up as the Christian church and say, we have got to be able to love God and love our neighbors unconditionally. I'm Southern Baptist, and it's a very big difference being the only African-American Southern Baptist pastor in the state. But it was a stand that we were willing to say as part of our Baptist faith messages, is that we believe that the sacredness of the human personality is evident, that God created man and women in his own image, and that Christ died for man, and therefore every person of every race possesses full dignity and is worthy of respect and Christian love. That means race, creed, color, culture, gender, whatever you are, we have got to be welcoming as Christ has welcomed us in all of our mess of a life that we are. And I believe wholeheartedly, as we have refugees and people who come about, we've got to learn how to love God and to love our neighbor. But the biggest issue is found in that we try to justify our own ways and how we cannot love people, sometimes within our faith, and it's a hard issue. Luke chapter 10:25, I'm not trying to preach and stuff like that. I'll leave that to Rabbi Joe. I was taking notes when he was talking, but that's just the biggest thing when Jesus is teaching and he's saying, love God and love your neighbors. And a man comes to him with selfish ambition as to why he shouldn't love his neighbors. He asked the question, who is my neighbor? And that's one of my things, my pastor Mason, he always tells me, we may not agree on everything, but I agree that my neighbors should have the same rights and abilities as I should have in life. And I should fight for every person who is in my community to be able to have the same exact rights, even though we may disagree on some certain things, that all my family and friends and all those in my community deserve the same rights as I am afforded here in West Virginia and America. And that's what I hope that we can fight for collectively. That's all I got to say.
Well, that was a lot, Michael, and thank you so very much. I feel very inspired. Let's hear from Paola Garcia now.
Hi, I am Paola. A lot of people call me P. I am a DACA recipient, so I came to the United States when I was about 2 years old and have lived here since then. I grew up in St. Albans. I also attended St. Albans High School. And I did not enjoy the experience at all. Since elementary school, I think it was third grade, was the very first time I really came face to face with my identity. I had a little boy who was in my classroom who I thought was my friend. We sat next to each other, we talked every single day, and I was always really excited to tell people, like, I'm from Mexico. Let me show you all this cool stuff that I grew up doing. Because even though I am from Mexico and we came to the United States, we were still fresh new immigrants, right? Both my parents and I. So even though we were in the middle of St. Albans suburbia, it was still a little bubble of Mexico. So I grew up really excited about all that, ready to share it with everyone. And I did. I was really proud of it. My parents were really proud. So, why wouldn't I be? And it was that little boy, just one day, I don't even remember what the conversation was. Maybe, I don't know if I said something to him or if he was just upset, but he ended up telling me, like, go back to Mexico. what? And I don't remember my reaction to it at the time. I don't remember exactly what I said to him. I probably honestly didn't even say anything because, you know, at the time, like, what do I know about that? Like, okay. So I went home. I was obviously upset because I felt like the stuff that I had been excited about was suddenly used against me. And I felt bad and I didn't know why, you know? People like brag about where they're from. No one, I perceive that, you know, most Americans, most natural born citizens will brag about where they're from. You know, everyone's proud, especially West Virginians. That's something I've noticed my whole, from 4 years old until now, I'm 25. Like, that's something I've noticed a lot. West Virginians are very proud. And I was proud with them, you know, until that was kind of like slapped in my face. And of course I told my parents, a big deal was made about it. You know, we had a big meeting, the kid was forced to apologize to me, like all this procedural stuff. And it was like, you know, cool at the time, like, sure, that's what they felt was necessary to resolve that issue. But what do you tell a little kid, you know, who is so proud of each and every part of their identity? How do you explain that to a child? And so it's always stuck with me since then. And since then, I've always felt, you know, alienated. I've always felt outsided. One time in high school, this girl, we were doing Spirit Week, and one of the topics or one of the themes was like, a career, a profession or something. This girl spray tanned herself orange, dressed up in overalls, had a sign on her that said illegal alien. So needless to say, I grew up very angry, which I later found out was actually just me being very depressed. But you know, I don't hate it. I do hate it because, you know, no one should treat another person like that. But I also don't hate it because I believe without those experiences, I would not be who I am today. I would not have struggled to find my voice. I would not have felt angry enough to actually speak out. Because I can tell you right now, at that point, the mindset I was in high school when I saw that, I was not in a good point to address it. I didn't know how to address it. Like, even though I grew up here, I'd never seen something that blatantly racist, like someone dressed up as my own people, as like a joke. And she walked around the whole day like that. Teachers saw her, principals saw her, vice principals saw it. It wasn't addressed by anyone. And I think that made me feel even less equipped to address it too, because like, who's gonna support me? But like I said, I'm not angry about it because you can ask anyone I know today. I'm not gonna be silent. I'm still very angry. I'm still very sad, but I've found a good outlet for it. And that is addressing the needs of my people, the needs that I had growing up that were just unable to be addressed because we were ill-equipped. But I do believe now, just looking at my community, looking at the state of things in the whole nation, I do believe now we are very much equipped, or I feel very much equipped to address those kinds of things and to be able to be proud of who I am and not let people kind of back me down from continuing to celebrate that like they did when I was 7, 8 years old.
Wow, thank you, Paola, for sharing your experiences. And now we'd like to hear from Bishop Mike Klusmeyer.
Good evening and thank you. It's good to be here and good to be with you all. And as I look around the screen, on the Zoom screen, I see my friends. Thank you. Thank you for all being with us. I will tell you a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from. I was born in New York, went into Connecticut for a couple of years, lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and then went, and I have to say, I lived in kind of a, I will say a protected climate, if you will. I went to seminary in New York City, in the heart of Manhattan, in a district called Chelsea. And it was at a time when New York City was really kind of at its low end. It had come out of its near bankruptcy and was still trying to figure out what to do with itself. So New York was kind of a hodgepodge and a mismatch of everything you could imagine. And I got to tell you, the people I encountered, whether they were on the streets, in the stores, or in my classes, were people that helped to shape who I am today. We had students from Africa, we had students from India, we had students from Europe, we had students, person who was a year behind me in seminary was from West Virginia. And so, you know, we got to sort of know everybody in all different ways. I left New York City, Manhattan, and I went out to a little town about an hour, 120 miles northwest of Chicago. And when I got there, this little rural community, this little rural church welcomed me and presented themselves and said, "We have just sponsored a refugee family from Laos." And I will say it was originally a small group from the church, but they formed around this family to help welcome them in. They taught them English, they taught them money management, they helped find jobs for the parents, they helped with the schooling, they helped every step of the way. And after a couple of years, they suddenly realized that it wasn't so much them helping others as it was the stuff that they were receiving from this family. Absolutely transformative. And people who were somewhat reticent, I'll say that lightly, and maybe even opposed to what the church had done, were suddenly at least peeking in and seeing what was going on and engaging with this Laotian family. And the Laotian family brought their family. Suddenly those who had been sponsored were now sponsoring others to come. And our community, we found, became richer for it. I served there for 10 years. I went into the suburbs of Chicago, basically where I would say was my home. Served there for another 11 years. And again, I will say the diversity I found made me a better person, opened my eyes to what was going on. One of the things we pray when we baptize someone in the Episcopal Church or in the Christian denomination with our branch is we say, and open their eyes to the world around them, to see God's hand in all God's work. It is too easy. It is too easy to just put blinders on and go forward and think that my world is the whole world. But when I have had my eyes open and my experiences broadened, I have been enriched and enlivened because of it. We sponsored homeless people. We opened up programs. We did all sorts of stuff. And again and again and again, I think everyone who got involved came back better enriched. In 2001, I was elected the 7th Bishop of West Virginia. I have to admit, West Virginia was a state on the map. I had driven through it twice before in my life, both times trying to get from Chicago to York, Pennsylvania, where my parents lived. So we came through 70 up in Wheeling. I came to West Virginia, and as the bishop, I am privileged to travel the whole state. We have had churches anywhere from Chester down to McDowell County, from Huntington over to Shepherdstown, and almost every county in between. So I have gotten to see the rich and the poor, the coal miner and the coal mine owners, and I have gotten to see the newcomers, the refugees, and those who have been treated well and those who have been treated not well. But as I said, when we had our little discussion at noon, I am constantly reminded of the prayers of the people. And I mean prayers of all of God's people. There was an old vacation Bible school song that says, all God's critters got a place in the choir. Some sing low and some sing higher. And we're all God's critters in this world. And so when we say our prayers and we believe what we say. But there are, and I won't go through all 5 of them, but there are 3 things that I have found to be formational and have been transformational to me to open my eyes to the world around me. One of the questions that we ask people is, will you proclaim by word, by what you say, word and example, by what you do, the good news of God? So will you talk about God and live it out? The second thing we're asked is, will you seek and serve God in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? Boy, I got to tell you, easy words to say, aren't they? We got to live them out. We've got to live them out. And then the third thing is, will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? Again, a command that I think human nature by its own self sort of says, no, thank you. But we are called by God to do these things, to go beyond ourselves. And I will say a few years ago, one of the Episcopal churches in Charleston came to me and said, we want to get involved in refugee resettlement. And I applauded it. We embraced it. We said yes. They found 2 things. One was the job was bigger than themselves. This little church, it wasn't so much a little church, but this single parish in Charleston, West Virginia said, we can't do it alone. And so they reached out to the interfaith community, and suddenly the doors opened. People came from all around to say, we want to be a part of this because we believe that Charleston and West Virginia will be a better place when we welcome the stranger. That was the start of WVIRM. And I will tell you, as I've gotten involved, and I have to say, my role is really just sort of watching you all take off on this. But as I have been involved in it, my heart has been broken open over and over and over again. And I have seen the witness of God's love. We don't all agree on everything. I dare say we don't, but we believe in one thing. And that is, we are better together, and we will I said one thing, 2 things. We are better together, and we will live out God's love. And I believe that we've done it. We continue to do it. We have a long way to go, because I got to tell you, change is difficult. Change is difficult. But we've taken some huge strides. And I've said often, when I was in seminary in New York City, I had to work in a hospital. The chaplain that supervised us served in Liberia for a couple of years. And he came back and he said, we have sayings in Liberia. And he would rattle off various idioms that were truisms in the country, in Liberia. And one of the things he said was, we have a saying in Liberia, the fish rots from the head. And I think the converse is true, and that is that the fish gets healthier by the head. And so I am thankful for the mayor for her proclamation and her support. I'm thankful for the mayor saying y'all means all, and that we're going to transform this society. We're going to transform the city, and it's becoming a home for all people. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing and for sharing from your hearts. And I'd like to turn the program over to our moderator now, Mollie Kennedy.
Right, thank you. And thank you all so much for sharing so many wise words and personal stories and letting us into your experiences coming into West Virginia, whether it was recently or quite a while ago. So I want to start with kind of a broad question. And if anybody feels called to kind of jump in, please do. But the purpose of Welcoming Week is really to elevate a spirit of unity that shows the successful multiracial democracy that we can be if people feel at home in the places that they call home. And that includes immigrants and refugees, of course. So from your perspective, some of you kind of have the bird's eye view of the whole state. Some of you, maybe this is more of a personal question. How and where does West Virginia fall short? And what do you think West Virginia can do to provide that feeling of home for everyone here in the state?
Well, I'll start by addressing that. I honestly feel that West Virginia fell short in the legislature because our legislators set the tone for all to follow. And when the legislator keep introducing bill after bill after bill that had the intention of being discriminatory and isolating, that set the tone for everybody to follow. When we try to put in legislation that says we're going to track and trace every single immigrant or refugee that comes into the state in the 55 counties. Well, and the question is why? Why are you wasting your time on such a frivolous legislation? And instead of looking at what the state needs, we need to improve our education, we need to improve our internet connection, we need to build our state, we need to make our state open and welcome so more people will come to West Virginia. Not put in legislation that says I can only learn Bible in school, or I can trace immigrants, or immigrants are not welcome in West Virginia. This is sending the wrong message. And until we change at the source, the city where the state where everything takes place, then that's sending the wrong message. When we have somebody who says, if my kids become LGBTQ, I'm gonna let them swim, or basically he means drowning. Why are you singling out one single folks and focusing on that instead of making everybody welcome? Let people live their lives the way they want to live it. Let people practice the religion they want to practice the way they want to practice. Let us not be isolationist. Let us actually bigots and racist. This is what you're teaching when you spend so much time on legislation that is not going to serve the majority of West Virginia.
I'd like to second that. From the legislative aspect, King has a very famous quote in one of his speeches about two Americas. And he says, it may not be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. I believe just wholeheartedly when you start to look at the perception of what can happen when legislatively they're saying, hey, we don't want these people here, we're going to restrict these people. West Virginia doesn't have a ton of cultural diversity, let's just be honest. It then creates a perception in those who are watching that these people who may come into our state are going to come with ill-fated wills for our communities. So now you're continuing this false narrative of those people who may be undocumented, may be refugees. And I believe wholeheartedly that they're just wanting to come and receive the same safety that we have here in West Virginia. That perception that just continues on, it creates decades and generations and generations of people who still kind of have unbiased opinion and even some racial thoughts towards people. So definitely legislatively, I think that's where we're lacking. And also they don't realize that the perception that they're putting forward, or maybe they are realizing the perception that they're putting forward, that they can continue certain agendas and continue, you know, to keep our towns as they are, instead of continuing, or as opposed to embracing the diversity that can happen within their cities and states.
BA, I'd like to answer that question as well. I believe that West Virginia falls short in regards to curiosity. I grew up, you know, from the young age of whenever I got here, you know, children pick up on English easier than adults do. So I, at the young age of like 4 or 5 and preschool, kindergarten, started picking up on English, and I watched cartoons and all of that stuff. And so at a very young age, I became the interpreter for my parents, not of my own accord. It's just because I understood it better and I could interpret it better and I could ask questions. And so I spent a lot of my young years kind of interpreting stuff that I had no idea about. You know, a lot of it was like immigration stuff, like, you know, applications for certain stuff, like certain requirements for stuff. It was always, you know, stuff that had an immediate feel of urgency, but I didn't understand the urgency because it was never explained to me. I was just told to interpret, which now, you know, I realize that you cannot interpret language without emotion and vice versa. So because I was raised that way, you know, kind of being the trailblazer, the one to figure it all out for me, myself, and my family, and those that are gonna come behind me. So because of that, I grew up always questioning everything. And I always felt unsatisfied when my parents would tell me to, you know, go and go and interpret this or go and do this. I always felt like they didn't give me enough information. I would always ask why, or what does this mean? What does that mean? Can you tell me more about it? Because I felt ill-equipped to interpret it if I didn't fully understand it. So, you know, at that point, that instilled a lot of curiosity within me. And so once I had those experiences, when that kid told me go back to Mexico, the only thing I could think was why? Why? And it stuck with me throughout my whole life. And that's one of the reasons that I chose the educational path that I did, psychology. Thought processes. Psychology is everything about societal environments. There's a whole branch of psychology called interpersonal psychology that says that your whole personality is established by all the interactions that you have with your primary caregivers in your immediate environment, and you go throughout your life looking to reestablish that same interaction with everyone you meet. So once I started, you know, thinking about all this stuff, like, why do people do this stuff? Why do people think this way? I just couldn't understand it. And that's really what nurtured my want for education, like my want for knowledge, my want to be able to disseminate that knowledge to common people, right? Because that is our job as scholars. That is our job as experts. It is to come back to our communities who don't have access to that, because for some crazy reason, the nation felt like they didn't need that access. You know, so many of our Black and brown people have been stripped of their history, of their culture since the very beginning of time. And it is our job to reintegrate that into our own mindsets. And so that's where I feel like West Virginia falls short. Everyone is just complacent in their old, terrible racist ways sometimes, and no one asks why, or like how, like why not, like why are we thinking this way, why are we not thinking? It just comes down to the fact that everyone's complacent. No one's asking questions. They're just being fed information and accepting it without question.
All right, thank you all for sharing. I don't want to cut anybody off. I just want to get a couple other great questions. We've had a couple in the chat and also some that we discussed before, but I just want to ask, now is obviously a tough time, to say the least, in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and we're witnessing a lot of lives lost, a lot of pain that's been inflicted by coronavirus, by racism, by the scapegoating of marginalized communities of migrants. So I just want to ask all of you, how do you respond to that? And do you have any advice for folks who are tuning in?
The advice that I have for everybody is that change begins with you. So for you, when you see somebody who looks different than you are, whether they're wearing a head cover or whether they have a brown skin, or whether they're speaking with an accent, or however they look, or whether they are LGBTQ, whatever they are, the change begins with you. Look in the mirror and see, why are you thinking of this people shouldn't be welcome, shouldn't live their life the way they want to live it. And open your eyes, open your heart, and respect their dignity, respect their rights to live the way they want to live. Respect the fact that we are a nation of immigrants. And the fact that we look different from you, the fact that we may choose to love somebody who is not your choice, that's up to the people. Life, as you said, Mollie, is very hard as it is. Why don't we just open our heart and our minds to everyone? Let people live the way their lives. We need sharing our humanity together. We need to welcome the stranger. Practice your faith. If I ask you to do anything, I ask you to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, who says to welcome the stranger, be kind to your neighbor. Of course, I'm not a Christian, but I do believe in Jesus Christ, and I do respect what Jesus said. All I ask you is to be neighborly, to be kind. Don't think just because you see me walking towards you, I am terrorist or I'm going to harm you in any way. The same thing as African American, the same with them. Just because you see an African American walking towards you, it doesn't mean he's going to harm or she is going to harm you. Open your minds, open your heart, look in the mirror. Change begins with you.
Speaking to kind of with all that, I know I'm 33, I'm a little bit younger and stuff like that. I know Miss Garcia a little bit younger. I recognize you now as one of those St. Albans kids when I used to come and do ministry. I was like, the blonde hair threw me way off, but I recognize that. But I think one of the biggest things is, especially with COVID, people are on social media more. We're seeing everything. We watched the George Floyd situation, and I've got an 11-year-old, and I had to explain the situation to her. And, it was something that was watched in real time. And even just emotionally, I had to pull back for a couple of weeks and say, I've got to get offline. I've got to refocus. I've got to, kind of do some self-care. And I think that's one aspect is, as we are able to, looking at our own lives and saying, where can I pull back? It's a necessity for me to be online. I do believe that advocacy is a huge aspect. And we've got a great platform with, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, social media and such like that. But we also have to continue to be able, with those platforms, to find the balance of advocating for those people who were most afflicted, but also still pulling back for our own selves and safety. But I also believe that we have to tell our stories. I know, Ms. Garcia, you were talking about issues at St. Albans. I got stories for days about St. Albans and situations and, growing up, and, we did our first Black History Month, and somehow I got Bob Thompson to come and to do a free music concert for the whole school. And during that first week, I put these flyers up of, African-American people who had done stuff. And I come in on a Tuesday and I see these flyers that just say F you, N-word, this and that. And it was one of those moments of just, there's a week after week after month after month after month when people are really put into a position when they are faced with their own thoughts of what race and bias and things like that you're saying. And as you were mentioning about, I hope that nobody looks at me as a terrorist down the street, that truly hurts my heart because of that misconception. But the misconceptions can be broken by us being able to say that we are going to speak truth to what other people may say is a lie about us. And I believe in the midst of COVID and Corona, we've got a lot of people's attention because they're already watching online. And I believe that people need to have positive understanding of who we are as people, who undocumented people may be, who these refugees may be. And we've got a huge platform right now to make it a marketable opportunity for us to speak the truth as opposed to continue the lies that are going forward.
Thank you. Bishop, did I see you ready to chime in?
I was, but Pastor, you did a good job, man. You're going to be a tough one to follow, you know? What I would say is, again, human nature. Well, first, and you're right, Michael. We've got all these platforms, and in the midst of this, people are finding themselves at home. We've been, many people stayed at home for a month or so, figuring out whether offices were going to open, what was safe, what was not. And we were very, very connected, and we are still very, very connected. But we're also very, very isolated. We can be together like this, but I haven't shaken somebody's hand in 6 months. And so we're in a community, but humankind was made to be in physical proximity and community. So this gets frustrating, and it's depressing. The other thing I would say is that, and I was reminded of this the other day, as you said, with COVID and the fires and the killings and the shootings, many years ago, I learned a story that said the pastor was in the back of the church after church on Sunday. 99 people come up and say, "Pastor, great sermon, great sermon." One person comes up and says, "Where'd you come up with that lousy sermon? When you go home, what do you think about?" Rabbi, we're all in this together. I know that. We've all been there, man. And I think the natural tendency of humankind, at least maybe just for the clergy or the ordained people, it's easy to go to the dark side. And as people of God, we're called to seek the light. We're called to seek the positive side. And so it is easy to go where we shouldn't be. And we're just called to be reminded that ultimately God wins. God wins. And so it may take us a while to live through the darkness, but we know at the end of the day, God wins. And so let us go there. So thank you, Mollie.
Sure. Rabbi, your name was invoked there, so I want to give you a chance to chime in.
I will simply say that I don't think that I can change people's minds or hearts in any meaningful way. I have to give them the opportunity to change themselves. But the only tool I really have, the advice I guess I would give is live my life in such a way that I'm bringing that light, which Bishop was saying, into the world, that I'm demonstrating what it is that I think is appropriate and right, and give them a way to see that that can work in the world so they can take that from there.
All right, thank you all. So I just want to take a minute and end on something a little more positive, something that can lead us off with a little bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling. There's obviously a lot of important issues that we've talked about and plenty more to say about that. But in this, in this work, in the current state, and in this, continuous uphill climb toward unity, where do you find hope?
So Mollie,
I
I'll
find
jump in
hope
for.
in people
Sorry,
like
go
you.
ahead.
I find hope with joining effort together with the rabbi, with the bishop, with Michael Farmer, with BA, with every single person who today and through this welcome week has joined us and said, everybody should welcome. I find hope with the mayor's comment who says, to me, when I say all welcome, I means all. That's what I find hope.
I'll go next if, okay.
Sure.
So I find hope in all of the dissent. Like I mentioned before, everyone's really complacent. What I've noticed a lot in the past year, even with COVID, is that more people are willing to speak up. And I've noticed it within my own family, within my own friend circles, within my own like social media friends. And they're all very little slight changes, like the way they word something, the way they phrase something. But what people don't understand is rhetoric is everything. The way you word something, the way it comes off, the way it is structured is very, very important. It influences everything. Language is so important. And so where I find hope is in those that are dissenting. I went to college at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky. And when I went over there, I tell you, like how I said, I don't feel like I was equipped in high school at all to address any racial disparities or anything like that. But once I got to college, once I got to Lexington's a bigger city, you know, it's much more diverse. There's so many immigrants and refugees already there. And so once I got there and I saw that, and I saw the possibilities and stuff like that, I graduated, I moved back home. There's nothing like that here in Charleston. Right? I was really disappointed. I started digging around, looking everywhere. I didn't even know where to start. But here recently, I've seen a lot of people standing up, like saying something. And it's just like, I don't know if maybe I blocked it all out of my mind growing up, or maybe I just wasn't as interested or as wary to all the situations going on. But I feel like, there's more people speaking up. There's more going on. There's more conversations now. More people are willing to go out. More people are willing to speak out against all this stuff. And that's the whole point, get out of your comfort zone. That's the only way to make progress. Progress does not come without change. If everything were perfect, nothing would change. And that's the thing, like we see all these problematic things. We see all the racism, all the xenophobia, all the homophobia, all of everything. We see it all, but we also see everyone combating it. You were not seeing that before, it took so long for every single movement to work up the capacity to have people dissent and to have people to say, what, this is bullshit. I'm a human too. We all deserve the same rights. We're all the same people. We all are living here, whether we chose to or not. And so we should all be striving for the same goal, and that is to make it a better place for our children. Who cares how comfortable you are right now? Who cares how much you've struggled right now? I can guarantee you that every parent will tell you their own struggles to give you what you've had, right? Every single parent's gonna bend over backwards to provide for their family, to provide for their people, to provide for whomever they need to provide for. So it's like, we all have the same goal, we just don't know it yet. And it's been really, really hard to reach that understanding. But, the more people speak out about it, the more a lot of the misunderstanding, a lot of xenophobia, all that stuff, and I know I'm talking too much, but all that stuff comes from fear of the unknown because people are not exposed to it on their day-to-day lives. I took an independent study in undergrad about, you know, the way that Trump was influencing trauma in everyday lives of the Americans. And a lot of the stuff that I was seeing, it was like research done on Trump supporters and all that stuff. And a lot of the stuff that they found was that they don't understand really what's going on. They fear because they don't have immediate interactions. A lot of the people that were saying that they had real xenophobic views and all that stuff, there are people that are out in rural areas, the people that are never, ever, ever, ever exposed to that. Exposure is what we need. And an open mind to be willing to be exposed to that. You know, it's one thing going to a Mexican restaurant to eat, right? Because you're hungry, because you like Mexican food, but it's another thing to go there and really try to learn about it, you know, it's just different. You know, you can go somewhere, pick up some Mexican food, some Chinese food, some Thai food, some whatever food, but it's different when you do start interacting with people. I've had so many people, my dad owns a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, and I've had so many people, you know, come in and be like, well, you know, we're really conservative, we're really Republican, but we've interacted with this person so much and now we get it. So it's all about exposure.
Love that. Thanks, Paola. And if anybody needs some lessons in dissent, we got Paola here. If anybody needs a master class on how to walk in there and talk to our legislators in the Capitol like a boss, we have Ibtesam here. We'll have to dig up some recordings of her talking to some of our legislators about Bibles in school and inclusion because it was inspiring. Okay, so what gives us hope? We're going to end with this. Rabbi, I think I saw you ready to jump in.
I was going to say that the interesting thing for me is that I want to go back to what I think of as sort of everyday miracles. The fact that when we have the opportunity to observe children, they are not bringing all of these fears, all of these concerns with them. They are taught them. And that my hope is that we can have the children teach us, that we can learn from them and learn not to be acting on these fears, not bringing this into the society, not making our community worse because we are worried about what someone may be when we just don't know. So I have hope that we can learn.
I'll say very quickly, what gives me hope is looking at the friends that I have on this screen and looking at people around the communities that reach out for one another and break the barriers that have been set up so long ago. And to know that those of us standing or sitting here together and others beyond this group have a vision of what can yet happen.
Wow, what a rich conversation. I want to thank all of you for taking your time, for giving us hope. I want to thank our moderator, Mollie Kennedy, and those behind the scenes who helped make this Facebook Live event happen. Remember that this will be, it is being recorded. It will be on the WVIRM YouTube channel. And I think I just want to end with the takeaway that I got, which is that we are better together and we will live out God's love. We have a long way to go. If we want change, we have to speak up and we have to live the change that we want. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.
Thank you, BA.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.